Hi. I was an atheist when I was in high school. I was a bad boy. And like many teenagers, those years were rough and they were bumpy. And the environment at that time was of no help because that was the time of doctrinal confusion and sexual liberation. Even priests and teachers were not very clear on what was right and wrong. And their emphasis was that we were free like birds. Of course, I realized later that yes, it's right to emphasize freedom. That's good. But then I am not a bird. You and I are humans. We have intelligence and free will. And our freedom is set free when we know the truth. Without truth, we are not free. That's why I have no sadder picture than that taken when I was an atheist. When I allowed myself to be swept by the trends and influenced by my best friend who was an atheist. Now, how did I become, an atheist, become a theologian and a writer of a book on Jesus, and even a convener through this book of this Jesus-centered life conference? Well, here's my story. If I was influenced by friends who were not believers, I was influenced by a friend who was a strong believer, such a strong believer that he wanted to bring people to God. So he knew as a Christian that he was called by nature, by the very nature of the Christian calling, that he's supposed to be an apostle. So he found a way to get to talk with me because we were classmates in PE. And his simple technique was to ask for the time. So we got to talk. We discussed his life and my life, and of course we got to discuss my atheism and my relativism, which was at the root of my atheism. So I told him, you have that truth and I have my truth. But then he said, no, truth is only one. Like 1 + 1 is always 2. White will always be white. If you put some red into a can of white paint, that can of white paint is no longer a can of white paint. So I was struck by his simple logic. And so I agreed. When he invited me to take up some Catholic doctrine classes, those classes were offered by a Catholic lay organization called Opus Dei. So I listened to those classes. And, I was floored by the rationality of the faith. This is the truth, I said to myself. And, I still remember the description of the priest about the awesome beauty of the Catholic faith. He said that it's like finely tuned architecture. Every part corresponds perfectly and logically with the other parts of the whole. Wow. And it's true. In fact, every time I attended, it was like a feast of the intellect. And not just a feast of the intellect, it was a feast of joy and of friendship, because I've seen no other people who were as cheerful as the people there. And they were sincerely concerned for my success, both academic success and professional success, for my well-being, for my happiness. So when they invited me to go to confession, I said yes. And my friends, that confession was the happiest moment of my life. I was floating on air. I knew, at last, God, who is infinite goodness, infinite beauty, was in my soul. And at last, I knew I was in the right place. But you know, that's just the beginning of the road. So the Bible says the just man, the saint, the holy man falls 7 times. Keeps on falling many times, and he rises again. So I kept on falling. I fell back to my old ways, and good thing my friend brought me back. Went to confession again, and I just kept on improving through the days, through the months. I conversed with God. I learned to be a friend of Jesus Christ. There were guided prayers that helped me. And one day, they asked me to become a member of Opus Dei. And I said yes. And the vocation was to be a numerary. That means somebody who will not marry, give my whole life to God, and to dedicate myself to the mission of Opus Dei, which is Jesus' message that everyone, you and I, all of us, are called to become one with God, be holy, and to be holy in the ordinary. That the ordinary life is a path to sanctity. Wow. So, if you're a businessman or you're a farmer, there where you are, God is calling you to be the happiest person in the world, a saint. But of course, vocation is not a magic wand. So I kept on falling. In fact, I fell in love. It was love at first sight. I had eye contact across the room for several seconds with the most beautiful girl I've ever met. She was blonde. She had ivory skin. She was slim. And the terrible thing was that she was smiling coyly when she was looking at me, and I found out she was my classmate. And worst of all, she kept on showing that she liked me. My gosh, so that was terrible. So I had to put up a big fight to avoid her, not to talk with her, and to keep on falling more and more in love with God. Because, you know, thank God, He made it very clear to me what was the bottom line. Most important thing is eternity. You know, eternity is no joke. It never ends. So, what is important is to ensure that I will have a great eternity. And the greatness of our eternity, yours and mine, according to Saint Therese of Lisieux, is love. Love is the only thing that matters, she said at her dying breath. And this is not the love of infatuation, clearly. This is the love of the greatest commandment. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, and to love others for God. This is the bottom line. And God, thank God, He made it clear to me that I have to live this way. That means I have to obey Him. I have to say yes to His call, because if not, I won't be loving Him with all my heart. In the university, I enrolled as a biology student because that was the fashion then. But later, I shifted to history because I kept on hearing this phrase from the people in the center of Opus Dei, that ideas change the world. Ideas rock the world. And of course, it made sense because our national hero, Jose Rizal, changed the Philippines precisely by his ideas, by his novels and his writings. After finishing history, I was given a scholarship to Rome and Spain to study there, and I chose theology because, you know, I really wanted to know God. And also, at the same time when I was taking all of those classes, I had this passion to find those most powerful ideas, the central truth of that theological architecture. After I returned, I soon became the head of Southridge School, Paref Southridge, because I was told there was nobody else. And Southridge was a relatively new boys' school, an exciting challenge, but a huge challenge. And at times it felt overwhelming that I went home one day and I said, you know, I need help, because, you know, I was new and I hardly knew how to run a school. And I was told this powerful phrase, which probably came from Saint Josemaria. It says, La misa aguanta todo. The mass can carry anything, can support anything. And this insight further cemented a teaching of Saint Josemaria taken up by the Second Vatican Council, that the Mass is the center of the Christian life, and it is the very source of all the power and all of the strength we need. And, you know, I later learned the words of John Paul II, which said, in that little host is the solution to all the problems of the world. Wow. But then this question remained. I knew many boys and alumni who prayed a lot and went to Mass even daily, but had big issues of morality, especially sexual morality. And I was very concerned because Our Lady of Fatima said that more people go to hell due to sins of impurity more than any other sin. So I felt this great sense of urgency to find the most powerful cure, the most powerful means to avoid hell and reach heaven. Well, the great thing was that St. John Paul II was the Pope. John Paul the Great. And he had this game changer, which was the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And he placed there in the Catechism that Jesus is the center. And for the start of the millennium, he came up with a strategic plan. And he gave this plan for the millennium and for all time. Perhaps the first time a Pope has given something like that. And he placed Jesus Christ, knowing Him, loving Him, imitating Him, as the #1 priority, as the very center of the plans of the Church. But the beautiful thing was that the next Pope was the greatest theologian ever to become Pope, Benedict XVI. His was the beautiful mind, the mind that loved to essentialize, to crystallize, to find the center. And before he resigned, he made this statement that shook me to the core, because there he pinpointed precisely the very center of all, the most powerful cure, in fact, that I have been looking for. In fact, I remember feeling like shouting this to the world, because this is the most important thing and it's hardly known. And Benedict actually was saying that this is the essential teaching above all, the essential idea, he said, of the Second Vatican Council. And you know, this, my friends, is the most insightful council of our time. It's the greatest authority that even the popes follow. John Paul II, Benedict, and Pope Francis. And Pope Francis, in fact, has been stressing this point and repeating it and asking us to repeat it and telling us that this is the central message of Christianity and this is the center, he says, of our renewal. Now, what is this essential idea above all of Vatican II? The center of the Christian life, the very center of our heart, mind, and spirit is Jesus' Paschal mystery. His love, His passion, His death, and His rising. Wow, here it is, at last. The clearest formulation of the real center, the truth that ties them all. And why is it their center? Because we are followers of Christ, and He centered His life, all of His days, on redeeming us through suffering. This is the very reason He became man. And it is here where He pours to us His infinite love. It is here where He saves us from all evils, sexual and non-sexual. It is here in His wounds, according to the Old and New Testament. They both agree. It is by His wounds that we are healed. So the Eucharist, which I've always known as the center, and then confession, which Pope Francis says should also be the center of our life, they are the center because they make present this true center of all. The Eucharist is a sacrament, it's a sign, it's a memorial. It points us to this past event that is the one sacrifice, the one and only sacrifice on the cross. Benedict XVI told us then that the right way to attend Mass is a deep awareness of this mystery. So this suffering of Jesus on the cross should be the center of our mind and our hearts when we attend Mass, and also of all our days, of all our ordinary life and all our hours. And then Benedict XVI took one more step. He gave us as his last written advice. You know, when a wise man, the wisest man, gives you a last advice, you listen up. And this is what he said. Among the most important things we have to do, the first and foremost, he says, is first, of course, we have to strongly trust in God, because we cannot reach God without God. We have to rely on God because, as Jesus said, you can do nothing without me. And then secondly, we have to ask God to teach us to understand the greatness of His suffering, His sacrifice. And this has been the secret of the saints. This is also the secret, according to Blessed Alvaro, the closest associate of Saint Josemaria, the secret that led Saint Josemaria to the highest peaks of the spiritual life. And this is also the secret, according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, the common teacher, a teacher for all, for overcoming all temptations. Think about that, all temptations. And it is the secret for fashioning all the virtues. Think about that. Industriousness, love for the poor, responsibility. This is the secret. And it is the secret of wisdom, according to the saints, of deep consolation, which we all need now, and also the sweetest joy. That is why when I undertook the Jesus-centered book project, I wanted to make sure that this message is the overarching theme of the whole book. And you know, to my surprise, Pope Francis says God is a God of surprises. God kept on somehow confirming through some signs that this is the way to go. And for example, the date of the imprimatur of the book, the date that will always appear in the book, fell by pure coincidence on the 90th anniversary of Opus Dei. And you know, the seal of Opus Dei is the cross at the center of the world. So I was flabbergasted when I discovered this coincidence. And you know, the central image of the book, number 7 out of 13 images, again by pure coincidence, is precisely the image of the paschal sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, with Mary beside Him, embracing Him. Why? And the most amazing surprise is that one day there appeared on my phone some words I never wrote. These letters, in fact, made sense. Unlike the usual accidental scribblings that happen when you leave your phone on, turned on, inside your pocket. The thing is, the words actually crystallize in simple words the central insight I've been discussing. Of all the prayers in my Evernote app, the phrase emerged in the prayer to Jesus Christ crucified, where the prayer says, "As I reflect on your 5 wounds." This is precisely the action that God wants us to do frequently. The word that emerged were, we're get there, we're together, because here, remember the context, that here is about reflecting on Christ's wound. Here, we're together because here, in your 5 wounds. So clearly, and every time I realize this, I feel some kind of tingle in my skin. The words are saying that here, in the Paschal mystery, specifically in Jesus Christ crucified, in his wounds, and reflecting on his wounds and his suffering, here we reach the one and only goal. We get to unite with God. He, in fact, unites us to himself. It is here that we are together with God. Saint Padre Pio said that to get the best results from the Mass, it is best that we think of our sorrowful mother at the foot of Calvary. That's where she became our mother and our guide. She will lead us, if we allow her, to live in accord with God's distinct salvific plan. And when we totally embrace Jesus as she did, the real living Jesus, Jesus who is alive, as Pope Francis loves to say, he is alive. He is giving us himself through his Paschal mystery, his suffering, death, and his rising. When we receive God's love and love him in return, that's the bottom line, then we will truly be free. We will truly be happy. We will enjoy God's love now, every moment, here on earth and in eternity. Please share this video and share the joy.